Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about Ruth Bennett Community Farm. I don't know if any of you know the farm at all, but we're out in Chester and we are on about 2 acres, and we grow cut flowers as well as have a bunch of programs where we give away food and have community workshops and youth employment program, and the cut flower sales we use to fund those programs, as well as grants, and we're part of the Chester Housing Authority. So that's I'm moderator. I'm kind of from there, and we're hosting this webinar series, and that'll be going into 2023. And we're just getting a bunch of people to come talk who have association with programs that can be helpful to urban farmers. So today we have Beth Sassaman from the Natural Resources Conservation Agency with the USDA. And yeah, so the USDA is, the Natural Resource Conservation Service is an agency of the USDA that provides farmers, private landowners, and managers with technical assistance. So they foster cooperative partnerships that can protect and conserve natural resources on private lands. And I'm going to hand the floor over to Beth. And Beth, I would also love if you would tell us a little bit more about your title as District Conservationist.
Sure, thanks, Bella. My name is Beth Sassaman. I'm the District Conservationist for Chester, Delaware, and Philadelphia counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. The District Conservationist title comes from the original inception of our agency as the Soil Erosion Service and then subsequently the Soil Conservation Service. So it was formed in response to the Dust Bowl. And when President Roosevelt signed the legislation, one of the things he did was started conservation districts nationwide. And so the way the structure of the partnership worked initially was that they would put a federal employee in the same area as that conservation district. The federal person would manage that district area, and the conservation district would bring in local partners to foster that conservation and encourage farmers to conserve their land. So that's where that title comes from. We have soil conservationists in our office, and we have civil engineering technicians, soil conservation technicians as well. And so it's certainly gotten much larger than it was with, one person in a county. But yeah, so what I do is I work with farmers myself, but I also manage the staff in the office too. So you were okay to get started in the presentation? Okay. So like I said, I'm the district conservationist here. I've worked for NRCS for about 17 years. 15 of those have been working in this field team that we call it. So it's the 3-county area of Chester, Delaware, and Philadelphia counties. That area certainly includes quite a variety of land cover and land use. So here is a map of our service area. And you can see the western part of the county is far more rural than those urban areas that probably you folks are familiar with. We have worked in the city, both the city of Chester and the city of Philadelphia multiple times. It just takes, we typically use some different practices and a different approach. But that's one thing about our agency is we're very adaptable, and we're really driven by the needs of the farmer. So it's not a cookie cutter. There's not a recipe for conservation on every farm. Every single farm is different, and we know that and recognize that, and strive to work with farmers to help them with what they need. So the biggest part about NRCS, the best part, is that it's voluntary and it's free. So a lot of folks, when we talk about conservation, especially in the agricultural community, folks are concerned with regulatory agencies. In Pennsylvania, DEP and EPA, especially in the Chesapeake Bay region, a little further west of most of us, there's a lot of heightened attention on farming, and NRCS is really there to be helpful, which is not typically what we think of when we think of government agencies, but we really are tasked by law to help only on a voluntary basis. So we need a request from the farmer or the landowner to come on site and do evaluations, write conservation plans, and help with implementation. And there is no cost for our services. There are certainly consultants out there, and some farmers do use consultants that they pay for. But all the services I'm talking about now are free. There's no application fees, no fees for engineering, nothing like that. So we don't handle any money from the farmers here. So this is probably the most important slide for folks that are not familiar with NRCS. This is our 5 steps to assistance slide. And I want to highlight really steps 1 and 5, because that's really the heart and soul of what we do and what we started doing, back in the 1930s, is planning based on the goals and needs of the land and the operator and the landowner, and then implementing those practices. The steps 2 through 4 are about our programs, which often brings folks to us. We provide a lot of financial assistance to farmers to implement conservation. So it's really an important part of our mission. But that step 1 and 5 is really where it's our heritage, it's where we come from, and it's really the heart and soul of what we do. So the first, we call this a program. Conservation technical assistance is really, like I said, that this is really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about those 2 steps. It provides farmers and forest landowners with the knowledge and tools they need to conserve and maintain the resources on their lands for future production. And again, there's no cost to it. So it's really, the way we approach this is we will look at the site, we'll inventory the natural resources, and then we'll discuss what we see and also what the farmer or the landowner is seeing as far as concerns on the land, and we'll work together to come up with solutions to protect those resources. So conservation planning, this is a term that I mentioned a few times already. The definition of a conservation plan is a record of decisions and supporting information for the treatment of a land unit, meeting our planning criteria. So that's our rule book, for one or more identified natural resource concerns as a result of this planning process. The plan describes a schedule for the implementation of practices and activities that have been decided upon by our customer to solve those natural resource concerns that we've identified. So sometimes a lot of, we may be looking at water runoff or soil erosion, or excess nutrients. Those kinds of things are when I talk about resource concerns, which I think as maybe the next slide. We have a list of what we consider a resource concern and all the resources: soil, water, air, plants, humans, and energy. And we have evaluation standards for those, and we go through that process. The next, and maybe one of the most valuable parts of and when I say that, I mean literally one of our services, is the engineering. So engineers certainly can be quite expensive, and we have a staff of engineers. The engineers that service the southeastern part of Pennsylvania are housed in Lebanon, but they travel all over southeastern Pennsylvania. Actually, ours is here today, and certainly comes out to anywhere they're requested. They're often in the field and not so much in the office typically. So again, I keep saying this, but it's no cost to the customer. And we have a series of engineers. We have licensed professional engineers in Pennsylvania. We also have folks that are trained in engineering, but have what we call delegated job approval authority. So they can sign off on things underneath that the licensed engineer's guidance. We also provide quite a bit of on-the-job training to local conservation staff. So in Chester and Delaware counties, we would be working with the conservation district and maybe some other organizations and agencies that provide technical assistance. In Philadelphia, there is no conservation district, unfortunately, so we don't really have anyone to provide training to, but I know that there are hopes that will come to fruition in the near future, and we would be available to provide that training to those agencies at that point. So then we get moved to implementation, and we work with the customer to do this. We don't just hand you a plan or a design and say, get it done. We provide quality assurance and design, practice layout, and also operation and maintenance reviews if you need help. So at any point in the process, even after something is built, if there's a question or a problem, we can certainly come back out, look at it, and see if we need new solutions. Sometimes we come up with a solution for a resource concern and it happens again. So then we need to revise it and do something else. And so we're certainly willing to do that and know that there's no one fix for everything, and you can't always fix things forever. So we have that. And we also, in that implementation process, we also do the documentation required for our financial assistance programs. So these are our financial assistance programs. We are known for our EQIP program. That's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which is probably the largest funded, well, it is the largest funded program that we have in Pennsylvania. And this program provides incentive payments. So these are what we call payment rates that are intended to be at about 75% of the cost of implementation. For historically underserved farmers, those rates go up to be aimed at 90%, but they're not really a percentage of what it costs. And that's where it gets a little complicated and hard to plan for. So those payment rates are standardized across a 5-state area, and they're completed about 12 to 18 months ahead of when we're actually using those. So we say it's a percentage, but it's really not. It's like an estimated rate. So we have those rates when we're writing contracts for folks ahead of time, so you have an idea of what you'll be getting paid, but it's not just a percentage of what it costs. So it makes it a little uncertain. So the program does require that we're treating a natural resource concern. So there needs to be an issue on the land already. It's not a program that can be applied to a farm that is not in operation. There has to be, an operation. There has to be crops grown or animals being raised, something like that. The Agricultural Management Assistance Program is actually a partnership between NRCS and risk management. And that program does not require a resource concern, like I've been talking about. And it does allow for some new conservation practices or like new irrigation on land that's never been irrigated before. So it doesn't always have to be a resource improvement, where EQIP requires that we're improving the resources. And we have our Conservation Stewardship Program, which is it's sort of a reward for good conservationists. So farmers come to us with, we go through all their farm records and review what practices they're doing on the farm. And then they also have the opportunity to increase stewardship by doing some small enhancements to practices. And this is maybe as simple as adding another species to a cover crop or planting some pollinator habitat, something like that. And that program has 5-year contracts. So, and then there's the opportunity to renew them if so desired. So that is sort of our reward program for good conservationists. Then we also have an Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, or ASAP. That program basically it provides federal easements for to preserve open space, to preserve ag land. This program is run through local partners. So to participate in the program, you would need, as a farmer, you'd need a sponsor from a local agency, either a county farmland preservation organization or a private conservation organization that holds easements, because they would need to hold the federal easement, and then we provide funding for that easement. So I mentioned this when I was describing the district conservationist. Local partnerships is really how we operate. We have this voluntary free basis, but we can't do it alone. And so we have all sorts of agencies. We have, when we talk about Philadelphia, we're talking about maybe the water department. We work with the school district quite a bit, the conservation districts in the counties, planning commissions, research organizations, consultants, state agencies. So we really do partner with all sorts of folks to provide that, to get local expertise, but also work work through problems and issues. So for instance, with the Philadelphia Water Department, a lot of times we're taking runoff off of a farm, but we need to put it somewhere. And in the city, it's going into the sewer. So, that's a concern. Also, we've treated several sites that are along the Wissahickon Creek where they have intakes. So the water department is very interested in conservation, and they spend a good bit of money also outside of Philadelphia and the farms that have watersheds that outlet into the Schuylkill River. So partnering across those county lines with different agencies is really important to what we do. This picture is actually a flood control structure in Chester County. We have 5 flood control structures on the Brandywine Creek in Chester County, and those were completed in the 1980s and 1990s to protect the city of Downingtown and city of Coatesville. So these structures were put in place with NRCS engineering and technical assistance, and they're still maintained today. So these are kind of big protections that we also provide. So we're always working with one farmer at a time, but we also have this arm that does community conservation as well, and community protection. So like I just said, working together is a lot of what we do. And I know we're talking about the urban situation, and I know in Philadelphia, where we have most of our urban, we don't have a conservation district, but we do have folks that we are partnering with. So we do provide technical expertise and training. We have pooled staff resources, staff and equipment. In Chester County, we share lasers, we share rods, for surveying. So we do often pull those resources when we can. We also, that local partnership builds client confidence as well. We see this in the Plain Sect Amish communities in Chester County quite a bit. When you have someone local on the ground working with somebody, it really makes an impact because you have one person that you're working with. It's like having a physician that you trust, it's someone that you're working with all the time. And then, we also have historically underserved customers that we're working with as well. And it's the same thing there. We certainly have better luck when we're talking to folks that aren't familiar with our services. If there's someone that they know and trust that has worked with us before, knows what we're doing, and can help facilitate that process. There's also supplemental funding when we work with partners. They can get additional money, and like I said, when we do payment rates, sometimes we miss, and sometimes we're not really providing enough incentive, and it's hard to implement the practices that we might have in a contract. So some of those partner agencies will also write grants and get additional funding for our farmers, which is really helpful to getting conservation on the ground. So, our mission is to help the land, to help people help the land, and we really want to protect the natural resources and preserve agriculture for future generations. And also, for farmers, the land is really it's capital for the farming operation. You need the land to be in good shape to produce crops, and if it's not, the bottom line suffers. So we're really looking to help that. We're helping the environment, but we're also helping the farmer, and a lot of times, if you help conservation and protect the land, you're helping also the production and the health of the livestock. So that's my presentation for the day. Here's my conservation, my contact information. So I certainly encourage anyone who is interested in having a site visit or just would like to know more about what we do and how we do it. My information is there. Please feel free to reach out to me, and like I said, me or my staff will be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Beth. So one question I had was, could you talk a little bit more? I would be really interested to hear a little bit more about what are some common resource concerns you see in Philadelphia or PA area, especially if you can speak more to the urban situation, or the urban environment in that sense, but also just generally, I'm curious. And then I'm curious about what are some of I don't know if this question is so broad that it's hard to answer, but what are some of like the common types of interventions that are implemented to deal with things? So I guess, I feel like how I'm thinking about it is like there can be a resource concern, right? And that's because some sort of intervention or land moving hasn't occurred that can address that. But it's also something that you would theoretically invest in a piece of land in this long-term basis, kind of like you're talking about, that down the line makes land more valuable and addresses this problem. So yeah, I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Sure. So a lot of the work that we've done in the urban parts of our area include high tunnels. We've been funding high tunnel structures for probably, I don't know, 15 years or so. So that's one of our number one practices. And the resource concern that we are attributing that to is it's plant health and plant adaptability. So it allows us to extend the growing season and grow plants that may not be suitable to grow all the time or in a longer season in Pennsylvania than they do, and the high tunnels help that. Another thing that we've been asked or folks inquire about is water availability. So we recently had a farm that they just have a lot of runoff, and so they just want to collect the runoff from the site and use it for irrigation. And so that is something that we're looking at and working on. Sometimes we have to see how it's going to fit into one of our programs and see if it will work. But I think we really try to make sure that if something can be to make sure it can be funded with EQIP and make sure we have a resource concern to address with it. Soil erosion and nutrient loss is also a really important resource concern that we are asked to help with quite a bit. I mentioned the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is in the news, and excess nitrogen in the Chesapeake Bay has been for years a large concern. So mitigating the deposition of those nutrients off of ag lands is important. And so we do that in a number of ways. Manure storages are one thing that we do, and we've done manure storages even for sites in the city. Most recently, we worked on an equine operation that has a stocking facility for manure. So, collecting manure, keeping it in a stabilized place before it can be either exported or land applied is a lot of what we do. And like I said, we do a lot with soil erosion in urban environments. I think for the most part, the soil is rather controlled because we're often working in raised beds. The other thing that we've talked about lately, and we haven't gotten into it too much, but is soil remediation contamination. We had a large project that in the 1990s where we did a lot of replacement of soils in community gardens because it's not really viable to grow plants in. Most farmers are building raised beds and importing soil material. So if we're not sure, don't have it in our payment schedule yet, but we're working to get some assistance for doing that kind of, soil exchange or soil supplementation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And that actually reminded me of another question that I had, that when Melissa Wibreck was presenting from the Farm Service Agency on Monday, we were talking a little bit about how to get access to the Farm Service Agency programs, and specifically like needing to get a farm number, like needing to get registered with them. And so that's leading me to kind of be curious about for the NRCS, is there distinction between or not a distinction, but is there an eligibility requirement, I guess, around whether you're a for-profit farm or a nonprofit farm, or whether is it necessary to be registered in that way that's required for the Farm Service Agency? Because also hearing you talk, the thought I had was, oh, well, it sounds like most farms could benefit from having somebody come look at it, and there's probably always something there, So yeah, I'm curious about that as well. But then I heard you say that you do work with community farms. So yeah, if you could just speak to that distinction and the eligibility and how someone would go about retaining your service?
Sure. So for the what I talked about, the conservation technical assistance, we really just need to have a farm record established, which is pretty simple. It's just providing some, the name, address, tax ID of the operation, whether that's a person or that's an organization. And Farm Service Agency does keep those records, but we're more on the ground than they are. They're sort of like a counter service agency where people come in, bring their records, and they put it into the system and they have them sign papers. Because we're out in the field, and a lot of times we're on the farm, we can vary that paperwork back and forth and sort of be an intermediate for that paperwork. When it comes to participation in our financial assistance programs, there are eligibility documents that we need. What we typically do is, and different field offices do this differently, but what we do here is we provide all the documents to the participant, and we work with them to get it completed and submitted to Farm Service Agency. So it's not just, a lot of times they would say, call Farm Service Agency and get your eligibility. And that, especially when you're talking about some of these different organizations, it's a lot more difficult to complete the paperwork, and it can turn people off, and they just say, oh, I'm not going to do the paperwork. I don't, it's not worth it. So there are eligibility, there are some requirements for being eligible for programs. One is the adjusted gross income can't be more than $900,000, and that's average over the 3 previous tax years. That's one requirement. That's for the agency and the organization and any members, and that's adjusted. So it comes right off of your tax return, and it actually, they verify it with the IRS, but that's one of our requirements. The other one is to keep land. It's the highly erodible and wetland conservation provisions of the Food Security Act of 1985. So since 1985, we required anyone getting financial assistance to not exceed the soil loss, the tolerable soil loss of their land, and also to not destroy any wetlands. Nowadays, both of those things are not much of an issue. Most farmers are very conservation minded and are not losing that much soil, and also the regulatory knowledge of the agencies that regulate wetland draining and things like that they're very present in the community. And I think folks know that you can't just drain a wetland. So those are things that you have to sign paperwork for. So it can be a lot. And even some of the forms, we have to have our Farm Service Agency counterparts work with the farmers to complete. But we're really lucky to have some really good staff down here, and they can walk people through it. So there is paperwork as always, because we're a government agency and they're stereotypes for a reason, but we really try and help people through that, because it can be a lot.
Okay, so yeah, that's definitely helpful. Just to clarify that, those initial phases of, like, let's say somebody wants, I don't know, to get a soil reading done, and is that's something that you would do for free, or is that something that you come out and you don't necessarily have to be registered in these ways, or is there always kind of I have to get these certain documentations in order first? Because I thought maybe what I was hearing was that it's more for when these big projects with implementing a large scale project to deal with some conservation issue on the land, and getting access to the financial assistance programs is maybe more when there is a requirement, or like the eligibility stuff comes into place and the documentation and stuff comes into place. And then also, I think maybe I just missed it, but could you clarify how nonprofits where they fall into this?
Sure. So the first part of your question is, so we have you can look at it 2 ways. So we have the ability to do brief technical assistance, which doesn't require any record keeping, and we don't have to submit any beans to be counted. If we're doing a conservation plan and providing documents, we do need you to be registered in the system because that's how we generate the plan. The eligibility documents and all that, the adjusted gross income and those sorts of things, that comes when you apply for financial assistance. So we register you in the system. We can write a conservation plan and you don't have to fill out all that extra paperwork. The other thing that being registered does, and folks in the city, I think, are really interested in this, is it puts you in the USDA database, and then you get ag censuses and you're counted, and it shows that there are farmers in those urban areas, which if you're not registered as a farmer, as an owner or operator or other tenant, as Farm Service Agency calls them, it really helps kind of show the community when we're talking about USDA records. And other USDA agencies share records. So the National Ag Statistics Agency, NASA, does the ag census. They would have information, but it's illegal for us to share farmer information with anyone else. So we can do it within USDA agencies, but we can't publish lists of our farmers. So we have to protect that information. And we also can't share conservation plan information with a neighbor or anyone that just calls and asks for a plan. So that information is protected. It's not publicized or used for anything other than those USDA business. When it comes to nonprofits and even co-ops or CSAs, we can work through eligibility. Nonprofit organizations are considered to not have any real members. So when you're talking about a corporation, there are shareholders, and we do need documentation for them. But when you're talking about a nonprofit, it's considered to have more members than you can count because it's everyone, or a CSA, you're selling shares. So those organizations for our programs are eligible, and our Farm Service Agency offices are pretty well versed in it. And actually, we had a true co-op come in from Philadelphia this past year, and they were really diligent about working through their process and their rules to see how we could work with them. And eventually it was determined that, yeah, we can do it. And they worked around their system to get them in. So it's a learning process a little bit when we're getting into some of the sort of newer urban ag organizations, but I don't see it as a barrier entirely. We just need to, to push through it and get those answers. And we've been doing it.
Thank you. The presenter from the Farm Service Agency was saying a very similar thing of just really encouraging people to reach out and to kind of see what can work, because they're trying to make it work, and everybody's situation is really different. And so I feel like I'm hearing that reiterated also from you. And yeah, I just wanted to invite anybody else to ask any questions. I know we had some people come in a little bit late, and so this has been recorded, and I'm going to be sending out an email with the recording of Beth's presentation, as well as her PowerPoint. But just if anybody had any specific questions that comes from, the experience, where they're coming from, and what they're looking for, why they were interested in this. If they have any questions, now would be a great time. And I also just want to say thank you so much, Beth, for presenting.
Yeah, thanks for having me and letting me introduce everyone to NRCS.
Yeah. And if questions, they can go into the chat, or if you just want to raise a hand. And if not, maybe I'll just give everybody a couple minutes, like 2 minutes or something like that. And and then we'll end for the day. Oh, please go ahead and share. Thank you. Suman.
Hello. Hello, good evening. Ma'am, I'm Suman Saurabh, a nutritional research scientist from India. Okay. I've researched something that are 100% natural and we grow in our field. And we can make something we use pesticide, chemical herbicide and nutrition for the growth of the plants. Okay, ma'am. And I have discovered some technologies that has been assured that it is 100% natural because it has been grown in our field, and it can be used as a natural weedicide, natural pesticide, and natural nutrition. Because in this era, as we have seen in the COVID-19, that we need the 100% natural and organic weedicide that can prevent our soil from destroying, and also prevent our farmers to get infected from chemical herbicide just like glyphosate, 2,4-D, and other things. As you know that 2,4-D is the main cause of the cancer among our farmers. We know about, and the research has been mentioned in World Food Program. We have seen in that during COVID-19. So I have discovered something that I want to show you in this webinar. Please, thank you for allowing me to share my research. So I'm sharing it on your screen. Please give me some time, okay, ma'am?
I think we don't have time for other presentations right now, but thank you so much for sharing, and I'm sure people will reach out to you through the.
As you know that, ma'am, we grow maize in our field, and maize has the capacity to inhibit weeds that we found in our land. Okay, ma'am, and we can use it at weedicide because the maize endosperm can be used as weedicide also, ma'am.
This is just for questions about the NRCS, so we don't have time for other presentations or anything like that. But this is just for questions about the NRCS, and I think yeah. Wait, I just got a question. Emily, would you mind saying your question out loud? I can also say it out loud for you. Okay, so let me see here. So how large scale do projects have to be in order to qualify for projects such as the dirt replacement for contaminated areas? Beth, does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, so that's something that we've been exploring. We haven't been able to do it with our programs yet, but we don't have a size requirement for farms. So some USDA agencies, and in fact, I just heard somebody from USDA talk about farms needing to have $1,000 or more of income to be eligible, and that NRCS doesn't have that requirement. So as long as it's an agricultural operation and there's land involved, there's no minimum requirement. So if we were talking about doing soil replacement, I think it would be part of that whole farm plan. So it probably wouldn't be a minimum requirement on anything. And almost all of our practices, when we're addressing runoff issues and erosion, there's no minimum. Sometimes for wildlife practices, if we're talking about stream buffers, there is a minimum requirement there. But when we're talking about addressing, runoff and sedimentation off of farms and something like that, and protecting the resources so that you can keep growing, there's not a minimum requirement. Is that?
No, that's definitely helpful. Emily's saying that she's from a small college town in Illinois that has contaminated areas where we're looking into transitioning into community garden type spaces. But our two main sites are in towns with populations of about 8,000 and 15,000 respectively. but she's not sure about how large the spaces are in terms of acreage. So I think that you did answer that question. If you have anything else to say about that, though.
The only thing I will say is that when you're talking about NRCS, each state is run a little bit differently when it comes to programs. So the programs are written into the Farm Bill, which is a federal law. But there's some delegated authority to states. So within the EQIP program, there may be some things that we can or can't do in Pennsylvania that they could do. Did you say Illinois or Iowa? I don't remember. But
Illinois.
in other states, there may be some variability in what's available. So I would say if you are talking about doing something in another state, I would reach out to your local field office. Farmers.gov is our website, and it's really the clearinghouse for information and the ability to find somebody in your area. And you could get the district conservationist contact where those towns are and ask them about it too. As far as the size requirement, that wouldn't change because that's our national policy. But the intricacies and what practices are available may be different for different states.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
And if there's no other questions, I'm just going to stop the recording for now, and I will be sending materials to everybody. Please fill out the, oh yeah, and Emily's just saying thank you. She'll definitely reach out and really appreciates the presentation. But yeah, also please fill out the Survey Monkey. That would be super helpful for us. I'll be sending all of the information out. And yeah, keep aware of, keep up to date with all of our upcoming webinars. Those will be posting on the Eventbrite and through Instagram and Facebook. So we really hope to see you all there. And thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.